Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer, and in this video I'm gonna share some landscape photography tips. And some of you, if you follow my channel, especially if you follow my channel, you might be wondering, Matti, you are a street shooter. What are you sharing landscape tips for? Well, I also like to travel. And often when I travel, and I suppose it's the same thing with you when you travel, when we travel, often the main purpose of the trip is not photography. And maybe we have some company, we have a spouse, we have a family, we have a friend with us, and maybe those people who are with us, they are not so much into photography, and we cannot plan out everything just photography in mind. And therefore, whenever we are visiting some awesome locations, the conditions can be whatever they are, and we just have to take whatever we are being offered. The weather is the most important probably, and it can be anything. It can be beautiful sunny day, but it can be rainy, overcast, and also the time of the day is probably not optimal for those super amazing shots. And with these tips, you are going to get some really good and satisfactory results even in suboptimal conditions. In this video, I'm gonna share some pictures that I shot on my trip from Melbourne to Phillip Island. Phillip Island is about 2.5-3 hours drive from Melbourne. And what happened during that trip was that it was a really beautiful morning in Melbourne when we left. But once we got to Phillip Island, it was already overcast and even some rain showers. So this is a really good example of suboptimal conditions. My tip number one here is tell your story with multiple pictures and do not concentrate only on getting some single amazing shots. Those amazing shots that you maybe saw before you visited the location or you went to the location, they only happen when someone goes to that location multiple times and multiple times of the day, and they can choose the perfect optimal timing and the conditions, and then those amazing shots happen if they happen. You might get incredibly lucky and happen to be there just when the conditions are optimal for that amazing shot, but more than likely it's not gonna go that way. So concentrate on building a story with multiple pictures. 3 pictures, 4 pictures, 5 pictures. It doesn't have to be like 20 pictures. But that way your visit becomes more interesting. It gives your brain something to work on. And just in case you don't get those single amazing shots, you'll still get something that you can be proud of and something that tells your story when you visited that location. Take some establishing shots, take some detail shots, and take vertical pictures, take horizontal pictures. When you get back home, try to sequence your pictures in different order and see how the story comes together and how the order of the pictures can also change your story. All too often we only concentrate on single pictures, but instead we should be concentrating on multiple pictures and building a story, because that is more interesting and it's also more challenging. And like I already mentioned, those single awesome shots are not likely to happen on one random visit to a location. My tip number 2 is look for layers. Layers can always make your landscape picture more interesting. Especially with the long lens, it's so easy, relatively easy to make those layers happen. Make sure you have a foreground layer, midground layer and background layer. It makes your picture more immersive and it makes the viewer stay with your picture a little bit longer, at least a few seconds longer, because they have to look at the foreground, the midground and the background, or in some other order. But it makes them stay with your picture and it makes them maybe think a bit more about your picture when there is sort of more to look at and more depth in your picture. My next tip, I think it's number 4 at this point, is use that telephoto compression. Telephoto lens, in my opinion, is so relatively easy for landscape photography. Again, you can get those layers easily with a telephoto lens, and also with a telephoto lens you can avoid that unnecessary, useless foreground that is so easy to get with a wide-angle lens, and that foreground usually serves no purpose in the picture. At least that happens to me often when I shoot landscapes with a wide-angle lens. I get a huge amount of foreground that serves no purpose in the picture. It only makes it worse. But with a telephoto lens, and even with a standard lens, you can more easily avoid that unnecessary too much foreground, and you can concentrate on the main thing and those layers. My tip number 5 is the details. Don't forget to take pictures of details. It can be just a piece of wood on the ground or on the beach, a little bit of grass somewhere, a rock on the ground, or something a little bit bigger but still a small scale detail in the big scene. Because those details, they are going to help you to tell your travel story. It's very important always to capture the details. And also, experiment with the shutter speed. This is almost like another tip, but anyway, I'm gonna add it here. Take advantage of that awesome IBIS or awesome stabilizer on your lens and use a longer shutter speed to capture some motion in the scene, whatever your scene is. And if you have a tripod with you and maybe even a neutral density filter, you can go totally crazy and shoot ridiculously long shutter speeds and almost like transform the whole scene to something else. But also do not forget fast shutter speeds. With fast shutter speeds you can freeze any kind of motion in the scene, and that can also be very effective depending on the scene that you are shooting. Tip number 6. The scale. If possible, try to include something in your pictures that illustrates the scale of your scene. Maybe it's a building, maybe it's a person, or something else that can help the viewer to understand the magnitude of your scene. On our way back from Phillip Island, we spotted these surfers, and I'm using these pictures as examples because I don't have anything better here. But when you see the surfer, you can easily imagine the size of the waves here. And because I'm a street shooter, I also took these pictures of some random people at the beach. And I like these pictures, and also here the people can sort of help you to understand the size of the beach or the size of the scene. My last tip, number 7, is a lens recommendation. It does not matter what camera or camera system you use, but my lens recommendation is a telephoto zoom lens, and here's why. These days, whenever you visit any kind of a tourist location, you have pretty much some designated areas where you have to stay, whether it's some sort of a path or some other areas, and from those areas you have to be able to pull off your shots. And in that situation, a telephoto zoom is just the way to go. On my trip to Phillip Island, I used the Tamron 50-400mm telephoto zoom lens for full-frame cameras. And that was just the perfect lens for that trip. With a wide-angle lens, it is essential to be able to place your camera very precisely to a very specific spot to make that foreground perfect and to make that foreground work for you. But if you have to stay within those designated areas, you obviously can't do that. And that makes a wide-angle lens useless in those situations, in my opinion at least. With a telephoto zoom lens, you can be pretty much anywhere and still get decent shots. Also, if you happen to encounter some wildlife, you'll be able to capture those too, most likely, if you have enough reach. That's all I have for you this time. Some tips for a casual travel landscape photographer. If this was useful and informative, please do consider supporting my channel and check out my e-zines, link down below. that would be by far the best way to support my work here on YouTube. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon in the next one.